Welcome, everybody. It's Dr. Douglas Pernikoff with my wonderful and beautiful co-host, Miss Cindy Vickers. And we're here on Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show. Today we have a very, very special show. We're going to continue with round 2 of some events of Dr. Doug's conservation life, traveling around the world and trying to make an impactful contribution. And we have as a special guest, me, Dr. Doug.
And me.
And Cindy
for
Vickers.
For our training segment.
So Cindy's going to do a training segment. I'm going to give you a few notes a little bit later about the hot weather and what to watch for. So we're going to get started, and I'm just going to open the floor to our special guest, Mr. Imaginary, and Miss Cindy. Are there any particular topics you want me to address? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, actually. I happen to know that one of your animals that is a particular favorite are elephants, and I know you also have a great deal. When I say great deal, I mean great, stretch it out, deal of experience with elephants. So I think that we should talk about them, and if we have time, maybe we'll do a little nod to rhinos in honor of the baby rhino that was just born at the zoo.
What was his name? Was it Mojo or Mojo? Okay, yeah. I don't think he's on public view yet, but he's about a month old, I believe. And I saw some video in the back of where his holding is, and cute as a button. And he's just running all over the place. And Cindy and I were talking about the wonderful beauty and wonderment of these baby animals, even the giant vertebrates like elephants and rhinos and such. They're just so cute as babies, and as adults, they're quite impressive.
Well, if you are a Facebook fan at all, or I'm sure you can YouTube it, occasionally somebody will post a video of the baby elephants, and seems to me, and I don't have experience with elephants and baby elephants, but they seem really playful, and I mean, I almost want to say that they're cuddly. They seem almost kind of cuddly, but so silly. I've seen them playing in pools and playing with toys and sort of flopping over on the ground. They're like a golden retriever puppy, but bigger.
Yeah,
different color.
I think I told you when I was in Nepal on one of my missions, conservation actions, there was a breeding camp of elephants, and they would use the elephants then in both ecotourism to take people through and around to support the camps by charging money, and they also use them for different work details. In some places, like in Burma, and I'll talk about this in a second, but we actually got to see elephants working in the timber industry, the lumber industry, and they actually schlep the logs that are cut around and do everything that big machinery would do here in the United States. They obviously don't have that as a resource, but they use this resource, and they do a pretty good job of it. But I agree. I saw in Nepal at the breeding camp, I saw a baby elephant that was just probably a week or two old, and it was so cute. It moved, had more mobility and flexibility than you would expect, and it was, like you said, it was rolling around, playful as can be, cantankerous, just like a puppy.
So in that particular instance, could you get near that baby?
Oh, yeah.
You could, Mama wouldn't say.
Well, these were
it?
These were elephants that were part of their camp program, so they were humified.
Yes, they were humified.
Is that a word?
Not really. When they're very
Wikipedia.
Domesticated and socialized,
Yes.
and especially to their human companions.
But you know what?
But even still, I would think sometimes even a dog. Not all of them. Some dogs will absolutely let you near the litter if they know you, and you can pick up the puppies. You can do anything. There's no problem. But occasionally, the babies come and they're like, you know what? Nobody comes near the babies till I say so.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point. It's really interesting with elephants, especially the working elephants of Asia. They're different than the African elephants. You don't see many African elephant camps where they use them for work or ecotourism, but it's been a consistent relationship between man and elephant throughout the history of Asian countries. And I believe there's still about 14 Asian countries that still have wild populations of elephants, although small ones. And in this case, in Nepal at their breeding station, they actually would have the females there in camp, and they'd let the males come in and breed the wild male from the area, come in and breed the domestic or captive females. And that would provide some, I think they felt, some new genetic material and healthy genetic material.
Well, now, hold up. I thought that if it's in a captive breeding program, that you can't really just introduce a a mate from, another family, so to speak, because it takes them a long time to build a relationship, quite literally, and be willing to accept, this.
Well, but
if it's just, can you just bring in that super Tom Selleck elephant male?
Yeah,
and the girls are just like, I don't care.
They call him Doug. So here comes Doug out of the forest.
Oh, but, certainly.
So, well, it's different in the sense that these females are kind of secured in a way where they...
oh, don't even. Oh, no. Oh, I could have gone my whole life without hearing that.
Well, and the male knows what he's doing. He's a breeder, so he comes in. And the history of the elephants... Wait a minute now.
Wait, I'm sorry. I might have to leave. You might have to do the rest of the show by yourself.
The history of captive elephants have been that as they came from a lot of different sources. Many of them came into the United States as babies. Their parents had been killed out in Africa. They brought the babies in. This doesn't happen anymore, but the babies would be dispersed to the zoos or wherever, more often to the circuses. And then these displaced animals that had a fairly high level of intelligence, they were never socialized correctly. So that's why when it came to breeding programs in captivity, in zoos in particular, it started with trying to put animals that were socially kind of undeveloped, inappropriately developed, together and trying to create a family group. So even though they sat next to each other or worked every day next to each other, doesn't mean they had a chance to have a relational social development.
On some level, on many levels, this is making absolutely no sense to me whatsoever that somebody would even want to do that. So if you're going to breed an animal, why would you? First of all, I don't like any part of this. That's number one. But number two, you're talking about having an animal that is socially not really well developed, and then wanting to breed that animal.
Well, but you're missing the point. The purpose, it's difficult to breed elephants in captivity, a lot of other species as well. It's impossible to bring elephants from the wild to captive settings anymore. It's just not allowed. And so now you have a limited population of animals in zoos or circuses around the world, right? And we're trying to get them to breed so that we have a sustaining program for conservation in zoos. But zoos...
Well, how is it for conservation?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because number one...
Let me say the whole word, conservation. Okay, now go ahead.
Two reasons in particular. One is that you develop technologies that you may need to sustain a species that's almost on the way out, like, for instance, Sumatran rhinos that are probably number in the dozens at most, okay? So if we know in captivity how to manage those few animals we have available to us, and we can help them do it. Same thing happened with pandas, right? There was a lot of natural breeding going on, but there are a lot of studies were done in how to manage these animals. So that's one of the reasons that we do it. And the other point is, you have to have a limited population of animals in captivity. We can't do anything about it. We've got to find a way to keep them, and they're they're a highlight species. So if I go to the zoo, I grew up reading about the elephants in the zoos and in the movies, and they were always an endearing kind of critter. Well, they're a lot more dangerous than that, and we learn that as we get older, but they still were an image that got me interested in animals and wildlife, one of the images. So it's usually kind of like I said, it's a keynote species that makes you interested in the subject of conservation. And zoos in particular have what we call kind of non-refereed funding capability. So if you're in an academic situation, you have to apply for loans and grants and stuff like that. It's very competitive. Someone has to like your research and everything about it. But in zoos, because it's more of a business-oriented thing, if the zoo says, I want to have a conservation program in Namibia and supporting elephant, whatever, protections, and in turn, we're going to use our elephant here at the zoo to highlight the research we're doing in the field, to explain why it's so important to protect the species. People learn and are attracted, whether you're a biologist or not. You can be in the city and never know what an elephant is until you go to the zoo. So it's your only image and representation of that species. And then when you become a functioning adult and someone approaches you and says, hey, we need to provide some money for conservation in the wild for these elephants, then you go, oh yeah, I had such a good feeling. Yes, I'll do whatever I can to help. So it really is a brand.
Well, it's an excellent theory.
It works.
I'd like to see the data. You know I would.
Well, I mean, every zoo that I know of, every modern zoo, and certainly in the AZA, the American Zoological Association, and in Europe and Australia and elsewhere, South America, the zoos all have now programs that support wild conservation activities. And again, they do just what I said.
And they believe, at least, that...
Well, they wouldn't get the money from their communities if they weren't interested in the species, okay? So someone might love cheetahs, and the zoo might have a cheetah on exhibit. They're going to look for, and the zoo says, okay, we're going to work with cheetahs in southern Africa. And people are going to go, oh, that's so cool, we're going to be part of that. So what the zoo does, it brings both video and research materials through its association and sponsoring some of that activity back to the zoo education programs, back to the, when you go to a zoo exhibit, you see the data information, right, the story about the animal. All that comes back to be utilized on behalf of the community around that zoo area and encourage them to be committed to the zoo, which then is committed to conservation in the field. And yeah, I don't have to agree with everything that zoos do, but I know that that's a positive thing. It was for me. My whole life was I couldn't wait to go to the zoo and explore. And then it stimulated me to want to do something professionally in the same way. So, you know, it's not for everybody, and you're going to find something good and bad about any program.
No, I'm
you
not.
look at.
I'm not even questioning whether it's good or bad. I'm simply saying
Cindy
I wonder
hates
if
zoos.
it.
Cindy
No,
hates
I'm
zoos.
saying it's not exactly a scientific study. If that is the reason that people would support a conservation program, although it does sound highly reasonable, I'll give you that. So let's go back to the elephants for a little bit.
I forgot what we were talking
Yeah,
about.
tell me something about one of your adventures with elephants.
Oh, okay.
Like something that was exciting or what was dangerous. You started to say that people, you just don't think about how dangerous they are.
Well, let me start with my experience in training in the zoos. I have some funny stories too. So one thing was we were doing reproductive biology studies, basic physiology and biochemistry of reproduction, okay? And this was to stage for the opportunity to do breeding, for successful breeding, like we just talked about. And
You mean for breeding? Is that what you're trying to say?
for breeding, yeah.
Successful breeding
For successful breeding for breeding.
Okay, carry on.
And one of the studies, I had to get up every morning and go with the team over to the elephant house, and we would bleed the elephant for blood samples for hormone studies. We were mapping out their hormone motion. And I had to get between the two back legs of the female elephant because they have a real big vein there in their inner leg that's easy to trap.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I've not normally heard the term bleed them. Is that the same as just taking blood?
Take a blood sample.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
And, jargon of the field. But anyway, so I'd be standing there. They would have, the keepers would help me be safe because the elephant could sit down on me. Typically, the elephant's only recourse was to poo on me and peep on me. So I'd be sitting there, and I had overalls, and I would get drenched or pooped on. And then I had to run. I had classes at WashU. And I had to clean up, take off my clothes, my outer clothes, the overalls, and I'd run to class. And this is the honest God truth. I'd be sitting in this graduate class, and these people didn't know who I was and where I was coming from. And I remember this one lady was staring at me, and she just like sniffed me and went, ooh. And she just looked at me like, man, don't you know about just cleanliness?
Yes,
and,
like take a shower.
And I just looked at her and kind of put my shoulders up. Sorry.
Did you tell them?
No, I thought it was funny. But that was a true story. I would just say one thing before our break, and that's that what I was trying to get at in all my years in the zoo world, there were an average of about 2 to 3 human deaths per year in the so many years I was there. And
in the zoo?
In the zoo, because
of people who work there as opposed to
people that were working with the elephants. And it's because, again, these elephants came from different sources. They're not socially well organized in their minds. And if they don't like somebody, a human, let's say he didn't like they were handled or something, they kind of remember that. And
an elephant never forgets.
Well, yeah, that's what they say, and I kind of get it. But so people let their guard down because, again, we all thought that elephants are something we grew up as childhood, and Dr. Seuss and everywhere else, there were always elephants depicted as something special. And then you go to the circus as a little kid, you don't see anything negative. You only see things positive from that perspective. So the point is that it ain't what it looks like. There's still wild animals. If they weigh 14,000 pounds, they can crush you in a minute. And they have the ability and sometimes the determination to do that.
14,000 pounds. I thought
Yeah.
an elephant
12 to
weighed
14,000 pounds.
You're kidding.
Yeah, that's a big critter. So anyway, that's just the beginning of some
I
stories.
thought they weighed like 2,000 pounds.
Oh, no,
like
are you kidding?
Or 4,000 pounds, right?
Oh, no.
Isn't a ton 2,000
No,
pounds?
my wife weighs almost that much.
Oh.
Oh, I know. That's so terrible. Anyway, we're going to be back in just a moment. Cindy Vickers and Douglas Pernikoff, Dr. Doug from Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show, will be back and continue discussing this fun subject of elephant conservation.
But I be done seen about everything when I see an elephant fly.
Hey, we're back with segment 2 in our wonderful visit, Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. Cindy and I are talking about some of my experiences in conservation, and we're talking focus today on elephants because they're such a magnificent creature, and of course something that many of us grew up with as kids, just enamored by everything about them. You know, their size, their unique look. I mean, in the animal world, what looks like an elephant? Nothing that I know of. Maybe a mouse with a broken nose or something. But anyway, they're very, very interesting. And Cindy, I think you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah. What's the difference between Asian and African? And I know that African elephants are bigger. Is that right? Or is it the other way?
No, I wouldn't say that. Okay, go ahead.
You wouldn't say that?
No.
I thought that was like a boost thing.
No, different is some of the significant differences are the ears. The ears are very, very, they're just a little bit different shaped in the Asian and African species. More importantly, in the African species, both male and females have tusk, okay, the big tusk. And in Asian species, only the males have a dominant tusk, a development of tusk, and the females have little tuskettes. And
you made that word up?
I did.
Okay.
Their body conformation is different. The Asian elephants tend to have kind of a rise in their back, okay, more of a rise. I wouldn't call it a hump. And I find the Africans a little bit flatter, I think. And those are some of the major differences.
Are their personalities different? Like, are one of them, I know you said in Asia they tend to use them more for working and, like, you know, clearing logs and things, but what about, are they temperamentally or personality?
Well, I don't think they really
different?
are. I think the difference is that Asian elephants have been associated with human culture in Asia and Southeast Asia for, you know, probably thousands of years, and their relationship's a lot different. In Africa, they don't have that historical, cultural, social cultural relationship. So not only is actually the elephant is one of the gods of the Hindu religion and Buddhism, they consider that elephant is an image, a representation of the Buddha. And a white elephant in particular I think represents the Buddha himself and reincarnated. So that's neat. And
Have you ever seen a white elephant?
I've seen a picture of a white elephant.
Yeah, but never saw one there. Like,
I saw a picture one time.
Okay, but you never saw one in person. There's a difference.
No. I never dated one either. But I saw lots of elephants in Asia and Southeast Asia, and they were always in close association with the human community. And it's interesting also that over the years, the many countries that still have Asian elephants, there's always a hunter-gatherer group, or what we call the original indigenous species. And now in the modern world, they don't have a role as they did in the past because their forests are fragmented. They don't go out hunting the way they do. So a lot of those countries that hold elephants for ecotourism or other kinds of work, like we talked about in the logging industry, those people are the ones that are kept in control of the elephants. So they manage them on behalf of the governments. The governments own most of these elephants. And they'll raise them. They'll have sometimes 3 generations of family will be managing one elephant. And then those 3, like the grandchild, the son, and the father, they live and work with those elephants every day. I remember one time we were in Nepal, and we were out on elephant back working in the early morning, and we're going through a open pasture. and here's a big, giant male elephant, and he's walking around grazing, and on top of him is a little mahout sleeping on the pad as the elephant's moving around all morning grazing.
And a mahout is
the driver, basically. It's a little bit different terminology depending on the culture. Sometimes we all think of mahouts as the guy who's on the back of the elephant, but in some countries they have different names for different stages of where you are in managing. If you're developing as a manager, elephant manager, you might be a mahout if you're the driver, or you might be a mahout in one of the training stages. But these people bathe the elephants every day. They feed them. They live with them. As I said, they can nap on them. And even this particular male elephant that was roaming was a monster of an elephant, and he was in must. That's when they are in a heightened sexual activity period. The males go through this seasonally, and they drain from glands they have on their face. So if you're at the zoo and you see a male elephant and he's got some streaking down his face, that means he's in must. That's when they're particularly dangerous.
musk, M-U-S-K?
M-U-S-T-H, okay?
Okay.
And that's when they're very, very unpredictable. Their behavior changes. They're ready to fight. And this is where sometimes people would get hurt.
Oh, boys will be boys.
I know, it's very cool.
What about predators? Do elephants have any natural predators? I mean, I'm not talking about them losing their homes, because obviously that's a
Right.
great way to kill a species.
They're so big that there would be, for a normal-sized elephant, even leopards, they don't do well against them. Sloth bears in Asia have been known to confront elephants, but there's such an advantage to these animals. So really, the greatest disadvantage is the loss of habitat in humans. And but I would say I can't think of a natural predator for an adult elephant, unless it was a weakened elephant and a pride of lions that might be able to corner and damage. But otherwise, they're pretty self-sufficient.
Okay, so again, another family question about the elephants.
Yes.
So if there are babies, and how many babies does an elephant have?
Well, a baby has one elephant.
Okay.
And
No, elephant has one baby, you mean?
elephant has one baby.
And a baby has one
Yeah,
elephant?
yeah,
Is that
yeah,
close? So normal, but not twins ever? I mean, does that happen?
I don't know of any episodes of twins. I wouldn't say that it's never never occurred. I think it would be difficult. And they have a really long gestation period, or birthing from the time they're fertilized until they conceive. I think it's over 370 days.
Let's work on these words for a minute, because I know that Dr. Douglas Tyre today, they conceive, and then the gestation period
Oh, okay, wait a minute. Well,
So how long is gestation?
I'm a retired conceiver, so...
How long is
they're
is the
bred.
gestation period?
Bred gestation period, I believe, is around 370 days, I think.
Oh my goodness, that's long. Yeah.
So that's a long interval period, and then they will nurse the baby for a long, long time, like months and I think over a year. So you can see how a species like that could be prone to extinction if all the other parameters imposing on them are negative, like if they don't have habitat to expand, they don't have the opportunity to feed when they need to, they can't find appropriate mates. All these things can play a big role.
So if there was a baby and the baby was in danger, do they? Is it just the mothers who would be sort of fiercely protective, or do they, as a group, do they protect the baby?
It would be a group protection for sure.
And not necessarily just the mother and father, just the
right. Well, the father, there's going to be
whole group.
one alpha male that's breeding for the group, typically.
Okay.
So, yeah, he would be the head of the gang. There'd be other females that would be with calf, probably, and they would all be kind of protective. And I wouldn't want to get in the middle of that group, because those would be some mean mamas.
Yeah. And did they like circle up, essentially, so that you then?
I don't know that they would. I haven't seen that situation, but they'd probably somehow kind of herd the babies to a protective space within the grouping.
Yeah.
And then there'd be
I've seen
sentinel
that.
animals that would probably be out and presenting to the threat.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they're very, very social. And, they say they have the intelligence of lesser primates, not great apes, but the smaller monkeys that are fairly intelligent themselves, and they feel like elephants have that kind of intelligence. And when you think about that an elephant, as big and as awesome as it is and scary in size and strength, can have a thinking mind something like a lesser primate, that kind of puts you on guard. Whereas you think about a large animal like a rhinoceros, I tend to think of those more like cows. So they're kind of just there, eating and doing their thing. But they don't seem to have the same social development, cultural development that you see in elephants, which makes them very interesting. And they vocalize. They say that they have very specific language, and it can generate high-frequency vocalizations for many, many, many miles, and we don't hear it. The other elephants hear it, and it means something to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, wolves do that too.
And
for sure.
elephants also migrate, or I guess that's the right word. They travel around an area or a territory over the course of a year. Could be, I think, several thousand miles. Mm-hmm. So again, you can understand how human intervention, where they start to create agricultural fields, breaks up the forest, you fragment their path, roads and stuff like this, and suddenly the elephant can't do what it's evolved to do for so many, millions of years. So that's where we disrupt not only elephants, we see that same problem in wolves and coyote groups and many other animal types.
Mm-hmm, and birds. And we don't even have any idea what kind of impact that has on them. I mean, some things are obvious,
right?
Like they might not have access to vital resources like water or food,
right?
But if this is just something that is sort of innate and natural, what happens when you interrupt that? What does that do?
Well, of course, the farmers want to get rid of them. And I remember one of my trips when I was in, I think it was in Sri Lanka. There were police stops everywhere because there was kind of an internal strife going on. But we were called by the conservation people would say, hey, we've got elephants that are destroying these agricultural fields, and we want you to come and get them out. What does that mean, get them out? Where am I going to take them? How do I anesthetize them and transport them? I mean, it's a big operation. They do a lot of this in Africa more than they do in Asia, and they do it successfully, but it's tough. It's a real challenge. And so again, space, consideration for what the elephant needs in the wild, and all those things play a big role in making the challenge to doing conservation successfully in the field and captivity. So that's a short introduction to the elephant story. Amazing animals. I love them. I spent as much as 6 hours a day on elephant back. That was great, going through rivers at 12 foot of water and stuff, and you're sitting on top of the elephant just at water level. It was cool. This is Dr. Doug and Cindy Vickers of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you again.
When I see an elephant fly,
a heffalump or woozle is very confusal. A heffalump or
Welcome back. We're in segment 3 of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show, and Cindy and I are going to take some phone calls that came in. We're excited. We're not sure what the questions are, so we're kind of blindly going after it. So it looks like...
So we feel very comfortable in this kind of environment.
Right. Yeah, we got our dictionaries out and our computers, Googling.
We should just be called the Fly by the Seat of Your Pants show.
We're very good at that. Actually, our best shows come out that way. Our first caller looks to be a gentleman named Kevin.
Well, I had a question about my dog and the 4th of July.
Okay.
She likes to freak out when she hears the fireworks going and hides in the bathtub. And then she's kind of a mess for, it seems like, a day or two.
Yeah,
I didn't know if there's any advice.
Sure. Don't let her be near the fireworks. No, I'm just kidding, Kevin.
Yeah, that's the problem, because I'm the one blowing everything up. So.
Oh, okay. Here's a couple things you can do. Number one, I think it's wise, if you can, to put them down in the basement or someplace quiet and cool where they don't hear the greatest amount of that noise. The other thing you can do is talk to your veterinarian about one or more different ways to quiet and settle the dog. Some people just use Benadryl, and if your vet approves of that, it can give you some doses, or they have other true sedatives you can use. And these things are nice because you use them as needed, not something like a calming agent that needs to be on board for a couple of weeks before it has an impact. So I think that's the best way to do it. And then, like I said, just do whatever you can to keep them away from it for as long as you can, because it is irritating and scary for a lot of them.
I would completely concur with that. I mean, even if you had somebody who could dog sit, like, you can leave them at your mother's or whatever it might be, that would be okay if that's an option. But and where there's not fireworks, but it is so terrifying to some dogs. If they're hiding in the bathtub, it's very scary. And then what happens, I think, is sometimes those fears start to build, and now they're terrified of fireworks, but there could be a sound that is reminiscent of that sound later on, and those fears sometimes start to grow. So I would not hesitate, if it were my dog in this instance, to sedate them a little so they can just be like, I'm really tired and there's a firework, but I don't care.
Right. I think that's good.
Because I don't think that there really is any other sort of technique that you can use to calm them enough when the fear is at that level.
We should probably develop earmuffs for dogs.
Yeah, definitely.
So they probably have something.
They probably
out
do.
There. Well, does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, that's perfect. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, have a good, safe 4th of July, and watch out. You can get burned and hurt, and animals that are out near the fireworks, I always tell people, keep them away because they might attack them because of the noise or the sparkle, and they could get burned too, so we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, definitely don't have them out anywhere near the fireworks.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Good luck, Kevin. And on line 2, we have a young lady named Amy.
My question is, let's say you're out walking your dog in the neighborhood, and perhaps somebody had their dog out in their front yard on a leash, but it broke free and it's aggressive. If it were to approach you and your dog, what would you do?
I'd run and scream. No.
Oh, thanks. Good. Yeah, do that.
I'm going to let Cindy address that one first, and I'll chime in.
Well, let me just say that this would be in my top 2 of the least favorite questions that you could possibly ask me. Because
so we guilt the caller.
Because I don't want to keep you on the phone for 20 minutes here, but I think we have to define what aggressive is. But I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that, that the dog is not likely to bite or doesn't have a history of biting people, and you happen to know where a dog just charges you and will bite, but the dog is just really sort of lungy and barky and really scary and certainly could bite. So I'm going to just start from the precursor. If you know that there's a dog in the neighborhood is very aggressive, I would actively avoid that area, because there is not really too much you can do if a dog's coming at you who is very, very aggressive and you also have a dog with you. I mean, one of the things that as a person can do is that, they call them be a tree, is try to not make eye contact, don't run, don't scream, don't move, and just sort of wait for the dog to go away. That does not always work, though. I know people have been bitten badly and they were just being trees. So if it's a really, truly aggressive dog, you're going to have a really, really bad day. If it is...
You're so positive.
I know, but that's absolutely the truth. If you have the abilities to sort of see it coming, what I would do is if you see a dog just barking wildly, get as much distance as you can between you and your dog and that dog as quickly as possible before they're in a situation where that dog is running after you. But let's also say that it's the dogs do get into it and your dog reacts to this dog, or I can't even tell you how many times I've heard horror stories about a dog coming out and attacking somebody's dog, dogs that have been killed, dogs that have been badly injured. But if you do try to break up a dog fight, what you want to try not to do is get your hand by their faces or try to grab their collar, because your dog will bite you, and quite unintentionally. You want to grab them by their tails or their back legs, and if you can do that. But if usually the best thing that could happen is if somebody has like a broom or something that they can literally put right in the dog's faces. The end of a broom, which is like a bite stick, and you try to force it in the jaw of the dog, sort of, on the side of their jaw, just to open their teeth and let a dog break free. But I unfortunately don't have great. There's not a lot of really great information. If it's truly a dog that is willing to come and absolutely is a biter, and there's not very many dogs that will do that really, but it does happen. So mostly I would say you want to try not to make eye contact with if the dog is just sort of on the edge, I would try not to make contact. The same thing with your dog. Try not to square yourself off and look at the dog. Try to look away and kind of back down and be very, very still, and hopefully if there was an owner and the leash broke, they can get out there and grab your dog before anything terrible happens. And then I would, I think it's not a bad idea when you have a dog to get a lay of the land before you go for walks a few times.
Right.
And if you can, and see, are there any, dogs that are just going crazy behind a fence, or that you hear about these dogs in the neighborhood? Avoid them.
Yeah,
It's a really difficult thing to sort of get restructured if that happens to you or your dog also.
and that's the short answer.
Yeah, and that's the short answer.
So I was going to just mention my inclination. I agree with Cindy. I guess my impulse would be to bring my dog under control immediately, and if that means bringing him right to my side and taking control and have him sit and be still, as she suggests that I be still, then together you make kind of a big image. And if you're not out, your dog's not out lunging to approach the dog coming, then the dog's going to have to sit and figure if he's really going to come on forward through to you. So I don't know if that's going to work or not.
Okay, but yes, I would. I can't believe I didn't say that. I would certainly try to get my dog under control, but I was not seeing it as my dog being out of control. Just that there is this other dog.
But the dog's going to. Your dog's going to respond appropriately, and he's probably going to move forward towards the dog.
The other thing is, that's just one more reason why you teach your dogs to walk essentially at your side when you're leash. I don't ever walk your dog out in a flexi lead, and I mean never, and let them be at the end of it. I wouldn't even have a flexi lead. I'd just throw that in the trash if I had it. But teaching a dog to walk appropriately with you and nicely, for one thing, you'll love walking them, and that in and of itself can stop a big problem. It's when the other dogs look like they're not under somebody's control that sometimes it's a trigger to an aggressive.
That's a tough one. So you just have to, I think you said, Cindy made it right. Know your path, and if there are animals that seem to be prevalent and that might be of a concern, try and avoid that path or alter it, and then just be ready to stand your ground, react a little bit, and just kind of read the situation. Hopefully you won't come across it. Okay, honey?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. God, I'm kind of confused after.
Well, it's an impossible situation.
It is. I think on line 3 we have a young lady named Rebecca.
Yes, I just had a question to see, is your dog able to eat bacon at all? Because my dog is super excited in the morning. Oh, he's going to break his heart. He gets so excited when we cook breakfast and everything like that. It doesn't know if he could have anything like that or...
Well, I mean... As a veterinarian, I'm inclined to say you shouldn't feed table scraps, but don't come to my house and watch me take care of my animals. So I think that anything, if he has a little bite of a piece of bacon, it isn't going to be a problem. But if it was a regular meal and it was all the time, there's a lot of animal fat there.
No bacon pizza or anything like that?
Yeah, no bacon pizza. No, I mean, that's, if you know anybody that does that, feeds their dog that way, you let me know.
I will definitely let you know.
But however, he said don't feed your dog table scraps, and as he actually knows, because of all the vets we've had guests we've had who are nutritionists, that there is a great deal of argument to that particular statement. So I'll just leave it there.
Animals are prone to pancreatitis, which can occur any age, really, but usually mid to older age. And certain breeds are more predisposed than others, like Schnauzers are notably sensitive to it. So if they're going to be eating foods like that, they're more prone to have an episode, which can be an inflamed pancreas, which means vomiting and diarrhea and all those things. So it's also whatever the acute change is. If something is familiar to the animal's diet, that's probably going to be less of a problem than something that's acutely introduced and new. Anything that's unfamiliar can change the body. But again, if you know anybody who's feeding their dog bacon and pizza, you please let me know, okay?
I definitely will.
Okay. Thank you
There's so much guilt
so much
in that, in those last statements. I just can't even believe it.
Right.
Much. Especially if you have a French bulldog, because they're allowed to have anything that they want. They're the exception to the rule.
Here's some pizza with bacon.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank
right,
you,
okay.
Rebecca. Hopefully we helped you out
Thank
there.
you,
Oh,
Dr.
I'm
Doug.
sure
Thank
we
you,
did
Cindy.
not.
Have a good afternoon. Take care.
God, I feel so guilty now.
I know that was the least helpful question and answer period in the history of question and answer
No,
periods.
are you kidding?
On the whole world.
I'm sure that poor little girl that's going to get attacked by the dog is going to be in
Well,
trouble.
we told Kevin to drug his dog. We told her we can't help you whatsoever. The other dog will probably just kill your dog. And you, who feed your dog bacon and pizza and whatever he wants, said don't do that because they're going to get pancreatitis
Of course.
possibly, and then they'll have to come to the vet.
And that's why we send checks to these people who call in to compensate them for the abuse we give them. Well, we're going to stop and take a quick break here. Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show, Miss Lovely Cindy Vickers, Mr. Handsome Dr. Doug, and we'll be back in just a moment. Thank you.
Is what you covet, you'll find that they love it, because they'll guzzle up the things you prize.
Skinnamarink-a-dinky-dink, skinnamarink-a-doo. I love you.
Well, here we are, folks. We're in our final segment of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. And I just want to thank our special guest, me, for talking about elephants, and Cindy for driving some of the
For putting
questions.
up with it.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
putting up with me. And I just want to let you know that if you're interested in any training support, you can call Cindy at 636-530-1808. And I'm Dr. Doug Pernikoff. Our veterinary clinic is the Clarkson Wilson Veterinary Clinic. You can call us at 636-530-1808 as well. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to give Cindy wanted to pop up with a few quick comments about playing with your dogs and some
Well,
tools.
I didn't really want to do it quickly, but I just don't have any time. So I will just I'm going to condense this very quickly. And what I want to talk about are playing games with your dogs. There actually was a book that was out years and years ago. It was called Play Training Your Dog, and it was kind of cool, and all these wonderful things this woman did with greyhounds. You don't usually think about greyhounds and being
Playful.
perfectly trained. But I think there's lots of things you can do with your dog. You can play with the hose. You can play fetch. You can, just chase them. Or I don't like that game. We take that one back. Don't do that. But there are a couple of things I think are really, really great games, but they also support your teaching of your dog to come when called and to want to seek you out. And so I'm going to give you three quick ones. Maybe I'll give you four. One is that you just call your dog and you say their name, you get their attention, and you want to make sure you really get their attention. Get yourself very excited, clap your hands, make some noise, and run. You want your dog to chase you, and then when you've run 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, whatever it is, before your dog has lost interest, turn and face the dog, and then give them all kinds of attention and praise, and say, oh, what a good puppy. So it's this beginning of you come to me, I don't chase you.
So do you have to wear like a mailman's outfit when you do that?
Yes, you do. No, but you're trying to really, this is what you're trying to, the message that you're trying to impart to your dog is that you come to me, and getting to me is this really fun thing. And here's just one game that starts to support coming when called. So another one, which is similar, is you get somebody else, especially when you have a puppy, to hold your dog. Like the person would kind of kneel down behind the dog and just sort of gently put their hands right on the dog's chest, and the other person is got treats and toys and getting very excited, and you're seeing the dog trying to break away from the person who is holding the dog, and the caller says, Rover, come, and the holder lets go instantly, and of course now the dog's so excited to get to you, and you could back up a little bit and you give the treat or you give the toy. So this is building and a game. It's a fun game for the dog, but it's also reinforcing coming when called. And the other one that I love for teaching coming when called is playing hide and seek with the dog. So you can start with a puppy, or you can start with any new dog that you have. Get a toy that they like, generally a squeak toy, and put yourself someplace completely obvious, like you're both in the living room and you bend down on the side of the chair so you can be seen, and squeak the toy like crazy, and the dog is running because you're squeaking the toy, and as the dog is running, you're like, you can do two things. You can say, Rover, come, or come find me, and when the dog gets to you, you just throw the toy and let them have that. And then you start to make where you're hiding farther and farther. But as soon as they get to you, you always give them lots of praise and generally have a toy that they can play with or throw the toy. If you say, come find me, they will learn that to be the cue or the command to come find you. And then you can start hiding behind doors and really hiding in complicated places and have a dog who will come chase you. But it's also very, very supportive of coming when called, because you've created the situation where when you're calling your dog, either by come find me or say their name, they're accustomed to happily seeking you out. And when you're trying to do come when called for real, it's generally got a big foundation and is pretty successful.
Wonderful. So those are some good start points, and we can do a more elaboration on the next show and get people more interested. I just want to, again, thank you, Cindy, for all your great work.
You're welcome, Dr. Pernikoff.
Oh, thank you. And we will be back next week, and we'll be here to entertain you and hopefully learn something about something, critters.
There you go. Something about something. Look forward to that.
Okay, great. See you later.
Bye.
Next time.